All right, another running back off the board here. Bit of a running back run, if you will. Tank Bigsby, which, I mean, how can you not draft a guy with a name like Tank Bigsby? I mean, right away, got some great running back names in this draft class. I like him as a player. Again, do you draft him in the third round? This is where we get into the whole running back value and how much does it make sense, blah, blah, blah. Let's just talk about the player itself. Third round pick, spending it on a running back is definitely not as big of a deal as spending it on a first round running back. And if you like the player, I can understand the logic behind, going out and doing it for Jacksonville. Now, bit weird, right? Jacksonville doesn't need a running back. In fact, they just traded away their backup, James Robinson, who was on a cheap deal. So, bit of a surprise there. But I do think Bigsby does different things than ETN does. And maybe that's part of why they're going out and they're making this selection. And also, it's worth mentioning, Jacksonville does value running backs more importantly than other teams do. I mean, we saw it with the ETN selection, which I get different head coach at the time, but still, plenty of people still in the organization that made that selection. And, maybe that was just an Urban Meyer pick, but still seems like it's something they value. So for them, getting running back in round 3 probably doesn't feel like as big of a reach necessarily. And it's always good to have fresh legs there as well, certainly for someone like Tank Bigsby. So these are kind of part of why I think Jacksonville might be so interested in him. And again, it all depends on how much do you value these running backs. And with running backs, they're a bit of a weird position because they are difficult to evaluate. That's part of why it's not always the best idea to draft one in round 1, is because sometimes the best running back, consensus running back 1 doesn't end up being the best player. It's not crazy to think that Tank Bigsby could be one of the better running backs selected in this draft class, despite the fact that other guys went before him. I also think it's fair to say that, a lot of people are going to sit here and say, okay, this isn't a position of need, but a couple things. For one thing, I'm someone who often says you shouldn't just draft based on need. You should try to draft good players because, sure, it's not a position of need, but hey, in 2 years, ETN's going to have to get paid or use your 5th-year option on him, so maybe you can avoid that situation. Now, if Bigsby ends up being a really good starter, now you're in a better situation that way. So that is another thing to think about, is that how long is this going to, is just all of that, and I think another thing too is, well, yes, there are some players you maybe could have gone after. I'm sure that everyone, how many people who made a big board is Tank Bigsby number 1 on their big board? There's probably some other players at more premium positions you like better at this point, although how many, I don't know, because I do like Bigsby a lot as a player. But the other aspect is, listen, getting a tight end here, probably going to end up being a depth guy. Getting an offensive lineman, probably going to end up being a depth guy. That's just typically at this value, that's what you expect to have happen. If your third rounder plays like a third rounder, then that's a depth guy who can maybe, play a little bit, right? I always feel like for, round 1, you want a really good player. Round 2, you want a starter. And then round 3, you want just someone who can be a contributor. And, for a running back, it's almost a guarantee that Bigsby is going to be a contributor. I'd be shocked if he isn't. So those are my thoughts on the pick. But now let's talk about the player himself. So these are Tank Bigsby's Pro Football Focus grades, which aren't spectacular, kind of low 80s for 3 straight years. And you haven't seen a big jump like you typically like to see. But the one thing I would bring up is that this is not a great indicator of success at the next level, PFF grades, for the running back position. For other positions, it matters. For this one, not so much. So don't pay too much attention and don't get too discouraged by this. I think the best way to really, the only way I make my evaluations when it comes to running backs tends to be just by watching tape. So let's just, again, if you're interested in this stuff, I put it here for you, but let's watch the tape. So starting off with this play, I have highlighted a defensive player, a player for Alabama. Why have I done that? This is the running back play. Well, he's going to be actually blitzing in right here, and given that it's a running play in that direction, it actually could be a disaster. Watch, he runs in and yeah, looks like a disaster, right? Yep, that seems to be the situation. Tough spot here for Tank as he's trying to figure out what he can do. And for a lot of, running backs, you're definitely getting tackled right away, but this is where he's going to do kind of his signature move and the thing that you'll see him certainly pull off a decent amount. Watch him be able to move, and he is going to be able to turn the corner and pick up a decent gain on that one. Really good stuff by him for a guy who's, definitely a bigger back to still be able to pull that off. He's listed at 6 feet tall, which again, that's not giant, but it's relatively big. I did put him at 6'10" in my notes. That's obviously not right. That'd be quite the tall back, but no, 6 feet tall, but it's still pretty tall for a running back. And he still moves very well, cuts very well. So let's see another example. Can he use his patented, shiftiness in his cutting in, the receiving game? Well, he's going to be running a route right here. Watch as, there's the play action, and then he goes out, gets underneath. Quarterback says, yeah, let's just give it to you. And at this spot, okay, let's see what he does. Is he going to do the same thing he did last time? Well, as you see, yes and no. I mean, he does the shiftiness, but doesn't really do much. The reality is, he over-relied on that move. He over-relied on shiftiness and didn't do a great job at knowing when he just has to run forward and lower the shoulder and get the yards that are there. Which, again, on one hand, it got him some big plays, like the one I showed you earlier. On the other hand, it sometimes left yards on the table because of it. So, again, is it a negative? Is it a positive? It's just a part of his game. Like, something like this is an interesting play where it's going to be it's a jet sweep to Tank Bigsby. That's what's happening. So you see, pretty much everyone is accounted for Alabama. That is the closest unblocked player, the safety deep who can come in and try and make a play. Watch how when Tank takes the handoff, he, runs and he reads this play well. He notices the closest unblocked player is rushing in furiously, and there's a bit of a situation here for him. So instead he cuts upfield, and again, he does cut very well and picks up a decent gain on that one. This is what I like about him, is he has the size but moves very well. He kind of does both of those things, which is what you want to see. Also, something like this is a very good play of what he can do. It's going to be, so I've highlighted one LSU player. Really keep an eye on him on this play. Watch how when this play begins, you do see that he's, in position to make a tackle. And this is kind of one other thing that you want to see sometimes when it comes to running backs, is it's not all just vision. It's not all just how do you avoid a guy and make sure you get around him. How do you cut around a guy? Sometimes maybe there just isn't a way to get around someone, but you still want to get as many yards as possible. And I kind of brought up, he sometimes over-relies on the shiftiness. I really don't think he has to, because he is capable of doing what you see him do right here, just completely run over that defensive player, and I would like to see him do that more often, quite frankly, because he is good at it. So those are kind of my, some critiques, but also not massive critiques, because I think there's a lot that I really like about him. He's a good back, and, again, typically, there's a lot of good halfbacks that come out of every draft class. To me, he is one of those really good halfbacks that maybe isn't getting a ton of attention compared to some other guys, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if he ends up being a really productive back. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on Tank Bigsby, which, again, just to reiterate, fantastic running back name. A-plus name for sure. But, yeah, those are my thoughts on Tank. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And, of course, as always, thanks for watching.